Hey everyone, I am super excited about this interview with Logan Fullmer. He has dove into some of the next level real estate investing that I don't know. Maybe there's a handful of people that exist in the entire country that have his skill sets and his knowledge diving into title work, dirty titles, abstract titles, and the way that you can buy property sometimes at 20 cents on the dollar in today's ultra competitive, high valued real estate world and still get these significant discounts. Wait until you dive in and hear him, especially on some of the things like his Conroy property, where he unlocked the value of that. And it took, the researching of hundreds of years of deed title work. It didn't take him hundreds of years, but it was super, super fascinating. He's very transparent with his time, diving into parenting, how some of these life lessons of real estate investing is now translated into being a good father, and what he's done to even stop some of the fights between his kids about fighting over the TV and the remote, and how that all started from an element of some early fear of finally making some money and is now transitioned into these levels of success that I think is enviable to the masses, and including myself. The deals that he's doing are super fascinating, including historic mansion remodels. Can't wait for you to hear more about Logan Fullmer in this episode. Hey, everybody. Wanted to introduce you to my friend, Logan Fullmer. Logan, obviously, we're getting a chance to connect up here, and it's been several years that we've known each other. And I think we bonded over, a similar mindset and maybe a little bit of doing similar things. Doing similar things, I say, are a particular way of investing. And I've been a fan of yours for years. As I started digging in, I was just like, wow, what's this guy doing? Like you're doing next level stuff. So I'd like to, and maybe I'll just kind of do a little bit of a bio for you, to kind of give some people the foundation of that. But then I'd like to kind of dive in a little bit deeper, and let's talk financial nerdy into some of the things that you do. I mean, you're a roughneck, or working out in the oil fields, in Texas and West Texas, South Texas. You started getting into real estate, you started buying property, and, now all of a sudden you have one of the coolest properties, this mansion, the Gibbs, mansion in Government Hill, which is amazing. The remodel you've done with that. Now you've kind of evolved that into commercial deals and buying ranches and just doing some really rad stuff. How did you get to that point, coming from the oil field, Central Texas to South Texas, West Texas, to then go, I'm going to start investing into foreclosed properties or dirty deeds, and, maybe take us on a little bit of a journey, Logan's history of investing?
Well, man, I got to start out by saying thanks for the kind words. I'd heard about your deals in San Antonio through newspapers and through published stuff like that before I met you. So I kind of have the same admiration for the stuff you were doing. When we got to meet, I'm like, oh, cool. We have commonalities and like each other and all that stuff. So it made, that was a neat connection. So, but it makes me feel good to hear that, it's reciprocated. And I know it now, but it was, on the front end, it was kind of cool. So I appreciate all that. I say this at the risk of sounding like everybody else is, I always had an interest in real estate, but my mom was in sales and ended up becoming a realtor midway through her career. And my dad was a CPA. So I had a little background with just, the accounting stuff, the money stuff. That was a focus that was talked about a lot. And then of course, real estate. So, when you combine those two, you always think about it in a unique way. A lot of folks think about real estate, but they forget about the spreadsheets that go behind it that really support those big, beautiful looking projects that we all admire. So it's always kind of been there in the background. And I always thought about how to do it, but I didn't really understand the finances as well as I thought I did until I really started doing it. But, I worked for a commercial broker for a little while in Houston before I went to the oil field, and got to see him doing investments and retail stuff. And then when I went out to the oil field, I had a lot of time. I was working 12 to 14 hours a day, or I was by myself, sleeping, going for a jog, or just whatever. So I've spent a lot of time thinking and Googling, I guess you could say. But what I did find is San Antonio was a midpoint between Laredo and Midland. And those are two of the places I spent a lot of time working as the big city that was anywhere near those. So I spent some time, every couple of weekends when I had free time coming to San Antonio. And I recognized that San Antonio is the seventh largest city in the United States, but I felt like it was maybe 20th, in terms of valuation and attention. And I would consider it a tertiary market at that time. So I kind of started to just take a little more focus. And then of course things kind of grew from there, I guess you could say. But, I'd go work for, a month, save a little money and go buy a crummy vacant lot on the east side, and work for a few more months, save a few more dollars, and go buy, a little crummy vacant house on the east side. And a friend of mine pointed me in that direction, the east side of, early on. And the more I saw it, the more I realized, gosh, we have high value on one side of the highway and extreme low value on the other side of the highway. If that value ever crosses the highway, you start to get some balance. So I pretty much invested everything I had for 3 or 4 years into downtown and east side areas in San Antonio. And that's how it all really took shape. I flipped a few houses right before I went to the oil field, made a couple dollars, but at that time I didn't know enough or have enough resources to really make a living at it.
I feel like that's a little bit of a lot of people's journey is starting out in the real estate, doing some smaller residential type deals, and that kind of snowballing, having a little bit of success, maybe taking some lumps, hey, I did this right, I did that wrong, let's, evolve that and kind of scale it up. I find that interesting, how you've identified something as far as the market, seeing, the freeway, I spend a lot of time in investment in San Antonio, so I know exactly what you're talking about. But, to other people, like, what is that? Or if you can maybe talk about to some things that you saw or gave you some clues for investing, why East San Antonio, what was it about that got you comfortable enough to start investing in an area that was unproven or, pioneering, so to speak?
I'll say right now that I'm not a real estate speculator, but that's the one time I speculated in my life. I wasn't really buying things for less than they were. There was no deep value investment. At that point, I was literally paying what things were worth. And at that time, the market, just the general economy in the United States and the world for that matter, was really depressed. You're talking 2012, 13, 14. It was depressed relative to where it had been. So I felt like at that point, I was buying for fair market, what it was worth, but I did feel like we were at a low point. And that's what all the folks that have made careers in investing over time say: if you buy when the market's low, Father Time will do a lot of work for you. So I have to say that I did understand that. I did understand that my neighborhood that I was really focusing on at the time was just literally a few hundred yards from high value. So I just thought, God, if you get some bleed over, it happens. And I'd seen East Houston and Austin and the Heights areas, and some of those, relatively tight infill areas evolve as I just spent time in those cities. So I was familiar with that. But I will say that there was some some guessing, because if I would have chose to make this bet on the west side of San Antonio, it wouldn't have paid off, because the west side isn't worth any more today than it was 10 years ago. So there was some speculating, some guessing, and a little bit of education in there. But I'll tell you, if I were to have to say that I have to replicate that play again, this proves how smart I really was or wasn't. I don't know that I could replicate that again. And hindsight's 2020. So, there was some gut there. There was some risk. And also I had to look at the risk. When you're buying an entire infill vacant lot in the 7th largest city in the United States for $5,000 to $10,000, relative dollars, that's not a lot. So I thought, what's the worst that's going to happen? It doesn't go up in value and someone will buy it for me from what I paid. I didn't lose anything. My downside risk is virtually nothing except my carrying cost of the land for the taxes. Outside of that, if it exploded like East Austin or Houston or Dallas, my upside is many multiples, but my downside's literally zero. So that's why I was willing to bet, because I had almost no downside.
Yeah, that's a very sophisticated and healthy way of looking at investing that I think, a lot of people use emotions, or so much, emotion is tied to their investment. And maybe, you could kind of talk a little bit to that, your mindset of transitioning. And maybe that was your dad being a CPA and kind of talking about numbers, or, your family conversations. But what was it that allowed you to get to that place to think of it as that kind of de-risking, position? Like what am I going to lose if this goes, kind of thing? Like, was there something that happened in your life or something in your conversations, family, and even if there wasn't, I mean, as far as, just like I said, maybe it's dumb luck, but was there something that allowed you that space to do that investment?
If I have to think about it from a quick off the cuff answer, that's probably the most accurate. It was really fear. My parents were professionals, and I would say that, we were middle class, but we weren't wealthy by any means. And I'd never had this kind of money. So I get a job in the oil field and I was making 3 times what I'd ever made in the past in 1 year. And at that point I thought, this might be the best I ever do. So I have to do the best to protect this money, because this to me could be lifetime money. And it was brand new to me also. So I didn't go buy expensive, cool shit like everybody else was doing. I was like, let me see if I can grow this. So it's interesting. I wanted to protect it because I was scared of the loss, because I never had this before. And this is my first shot to have money in my bank account. But I also had to invest it in a way where there was risk, but my downside was less. So when my dad was a CPA, I learned a lot about finance. I didn't really understand I didn't understand investing like that yet. I was just fucking terrified I was going to lose all this money that I've been working 12 to 14 hours a day for. And I thought, how do I take a risk but not lose if it goes bad? And that was like primal instincts, like, don't F this up, Logan. And the more I got to read, as I decided I was going to be an investor professionally for my lifetime, my career, the more I got to read, the more I realized that this is like a deep value investors and, professionals look at it like this. But now I understand why they look at it like this. The primal instinct, or it can be.
So how, and maybe this takes back a little bit to the beginning. When, you introduce yourself, I mean, cause you're multifaceted, we also, talk on some private equity investing, and you've invested in some other deals outside of real estate. So like, how do you introduce yourself? What do you tell people what you are or who you are,
I've struggled with that. Folks always say, oh, you're a flipper. And sometimes I just laugh and say, yeah, even though it could be farther from the truth, it's gotten harder to explain that. And I just say, I'm a real estate guy. At that point, I don't know, because unless you're someone who's known and has made a name for themselves as a business person, if someone asks who you are, say I'm a businessman, they're like, you sound like an idiot. I'm not Jay-Z where I can say I'm a businessman. That doesn't work. So I just say I'm a real estate guy. And if it matters, we get into a conversation that evolves. And if it doesn't, well, at least they know how to do real estate.
That's interesting.
That's a good question. What do you tell people you do?
Yeah, it's the same thing because it's my wife. My wife's a nurse, and so she's a NICU nurse, and she goes into work, and people think I'm a real estate agent, or as far as so she's like, oh, he does real estate, and she's like, and then people are like, well, what does that mean? And she's like, I don't actually know what he does because it's this, and they're like, so he's doing really well because real estate agents are doing well right now, and I'm like. Some things like as a distressed investor, when there's no distress, it's actually really hard to find a deal. The flipping, man, I have a hard time making any of these deals pencil today. I mean, you have to really start digging, deeper. So I'd like to take that specifically. I mean, you have, a unique thing that you do, or at least I believe it's unique and special, is call it dirty title, dirty deeds, these clouded title properties that you've done or I've seen, and I've been kind of a fan of it. You posted recently, I don't remember if it was Facebook or Instagram, somewhere out in the social media. I don't know if you have Twitter, but you posted like this question of like this family heirship of so-and-so has this and they own this, and then they put some property taxes. If you can maybe, like, if you remember that, paraphrase it, and then how that translates to what you're doing with these types of super unique investment vehicles.
Well, in the past, I've made several riddle type posts like that, so I don't remember specifically that's what it is, but I can probably speak to how those kind of deals took shape and why they are worth dealing with. A lot of folks, they're not specialists in anything specifically, but they have access to capital and they're interested in construction and they like real estate, so they go on this endeavor of buying a fourplex or flipping a single family house or just building a spec build, something like that. And most of the time you got 20 to 30% margins in there if you're lucky. That's kind of what it shakes out to be. And this goes back to fear, being afraid of losing. I'd like a bigger margin of safety. So the only way to get that is you have to fix a real problem. And I started to find that the properties that had super problematic ownership issues, maybe they had some bad debt that was attached to them. Maybe there was fighting with the owners. Maybe it was a bunch of different owners that were fighting and spread out and all these different things. And you've got to figure out how to solve that. Maybe it's a commercial building that the tenant is just taking advantage of the owner, and the owner doesn't know how to deal with it, doesn't want to deal with it, or just chooses not to. Being the person that can figure out those problems or try to solve them is the one that gets the discount up front. And then when you get that discount up front, if you can figure out how to solve it, then that's where I think there's a lot of opportunity. So, I did some annual deal reviews where I said, which were the deals that worked out the best for me? And I found that my investment was lower in some of the deals that had problems. So, there were deals that would come to me up front and I would say, let me just give this a shot. And folks would say, I never want to fool with this. And I'm kind of like, well, this is the trash out of the bottom of their trash can that ended up at the bottom. If I can turn this into something worth something, well, no one wants to do those. So you have no competition. So I started taking more looks at those.
Yeah. And that's an interesting, way. I see it that way. I know that a lot of people don't, and I actually kind of know what you do. And even some of the things, the riddle me this, the ways that you structure it, like there's things, cause I've done a lot of title searches on properties because we bought a lot of foreclosed, properties over the years. And, I think the misconception is that like you're taking advantage of someone. And I think it's actually the opposite of that. Is there's oftentimes it's helping people unlock something. Like they want to sell a property, and especially San Antonio is a really interesting, city from that is, Grandpappy bought it, 70 years ago. had several kids, it passed down from generation to generation. Now, Susie has been paying the property taxes on it, doing the thing, living in the house, but, and wants to sell it, but can't because there's so many other claims to ownership on it. That title won't insure it, so nobody can get a mortgage against it. And what it is it's unlocking that, is going back and tracking through how to fix that problem. Susie, that's been living there for the last 20 years, or maybe her entire life, has been living there and paying the property tax and doing the other things, that she can now sell something at a higher value versus nothing. And so I think that is absolutely key to what you're doing. So, I mean,
let me give you some examples.
Yeah, I was just going to exactly that, like an example.
Yeah.
And then maybe let's just take one that, where it's been especially helpful. And then if you could take that and then be like, what has been like the craziest wild deal that, you did, and get into the nitty gritty. Like, that's, I find super fascinating myself.
Well, you mentioned unlocking value, and one that folks just have a big time solving is landlocked land. So technically you shouldn't have any landlocked land in Texas, but unfortunately, when a person subdivides property without a subdivision plat, which is not necessarily illegal, but it's just frowned upon because it's not the right way to do it. It's not correct, but you can wind up having landlocked land. Someone lets you use an easement, but it's not recorded. Just people don't do things right. They don't know what they're doing. They screw it all up. And that's one of the ones that folks have the biggest time solving. So I'll give you an example of a family that they were referred to us. There's someone I knew out of Houston, and this piece of property was in Conroe. It was about 7.5 acres. I mean, just a few miles from the highway. It was like a really high value area. And the family said there were 7 owners, and they were all generally in agreement that they wanted to sell it. They really didn't want to keep messing with it. No one had been paying the tax. It was actually scheduled for a tax sale. So we get called by the family through the referral, and they said, look, we've tried to sell this multiple times. It's landlocked. There is no easement. It's going to go to the tax sale. And we all agree to sell it, but we just can't get anybody to buy it without title insurance, and nobody will insure it. So I get to do some looking. I say, look, you got about 30 weeks till the sale. We don't have a lot of time, but if you agree to sell it to me for a really good deal, I'll deploy some real resources on this. So they agreed to sell it to me for about 25 cents on the dollar, maybe a little less than that if I had to remember right. But at that point I said, okay, I'm going to contingently deploy an attorney, a private investigator, and 2 guys one guy in my office and me. And we're all going to dig in for probably 20 hours, maybe 30 hours of heavy research on this and see if we can solve it. But you have to contract with me because I'm not going to take the risk if I don't even have a shot at making a good deal. So we contract it, and we get an old title commitment that they had that was worthless. It just had 7 people in title, no ingress, egress, and they were going to accept from coverage on that. So one of the guys in my office ended up thinking it was going to be a couple days. It took a week. He abstracted he first got the legal description of every property that touched this property and this property, and then did title search 100 years back on each one, grantor to grantee. So you wound up with, there are like 7 tracts. Each one had 100 years of grantor grantees. So we have this list of like 60 owners. And then we basically did an easement, or we did an entire county record search for each owner in that county's land records. Exhaustive search over and over and over. We spelled their names differently. We flip-flopped them, just added a middle initial, took out everything we could. Because my thought was, the way this property was segregated, we knew there was a family partition where mom and dad died and the kids couldn't agree, so they went to court, and it was big enough for the judge to split it up into pieces. We saw a lot of uniform sized tracts. And I thought, that's a subdivision or a partition division, like a true partition. So we ended up finding that there was a partition plat, is what it was called it was recorded in the land records, but it was poorly indexed. It was not indexed to the legal description. It was indexed to one of the prior owners, but names were misspelled, things like that. And we found a partition plat that included an easement grant that basically extended what was a county road that was stopped in real life. The easement continued all the way to this property. So I tell people landlocked land, I bet 75% of the time is truly not landlocked. The problem is the title company for $1,000 if they're getting paid on this transaction or $3,000, they're not going to spend 60 hours worth of work to dig. They can't do it. It doesn't work. So that's what we did to find that easement. Once we found the easement, we spent $25,000 to build a road, and then title insurance, clean, clear, boom.
Yeah, and that's, I mean, exactly kind of what I'm talking about, how super fascinating that is. And I think there's a lot of opportunity to help people like that in Texas because and the values are starting to come up, and it makes sense now to help them. I mean, because, like you said, 20 years ago, there were some parts, Conroy and, Spring and Tomball and, some of those other areas in Houston, until the Woodlands was built, was nothing. It was, worth nothing. And, same thing, it wouldn't have been worth spending that time to track that down. So it's a unique time in the world. And I don't think that's exclusive to Texas. The values of everything are going up right now, especially in real estate. It's just, how did you get started doing these dirty title investments? I don't think that was the first deal you did was a landlocked thing. You mentioned, these attorneys and your title extracts and those other things. Maybe you did. Maybe you just walked off of an oil field and laying pipe that you're just like walked out and be like, now I'm going to do title search.
Yeah.
Take me to how you got started doing that.
Well, I'll say it wasn't that methodical and well thought out, but property used to be really low priced in the city that I started in. And I recall seeing the prices start to climb and climb and climb. And I thought, gosh, it's going to get harder for me to be able to do this because prices are going up. But I wound up buying a piece of property without title insurance because it was cheap. And I just thought, what the heck? I don't have much at risk. And somebody warned me that I might have a title problem, and I didn't think I did. Long story short, I ended up having one, and I had to fix it. I'd spent enough money that I didn't want to walk away, but it wasn't enough to ruin my life. So I had to fix the darn thing. And it took me probably a year, maybe a little bit more. And I had to pay a bunch of legal fees to lawyers to just get them to explain things to me because I didn't know what I didn't know. But after I worked through that process, I understood this is solvable. And as I started to see the pricing come up, I still started to see certain types of properties that people were willing to nearly give away because no one could fix the problem. None of them were willing to spend money with attorneys to fix it. None of them could agree on who was going to handle the deal. And it was just a wreck. And folks were still willing to nearly give those away because the problems associated with it required $400 to $500 an hour work to fix them. And when I realized folks would still basically give those away, I thought, well, here's a way I can enter a deal for a low price. And if I can figure out how to solve it, I brought value of, multiples of 5 or 10 to it. So I did actively, when the business started to get a little more stable, I did actively acknowledge that I was taking these on because they made sense. And I started to build a skill set that could do it. So I said, these are good deals, I'll do them.
So you have a genealogist or a couple of them in your office. Tell me about that. Why you have them?
It started out just needing a good researcher because, there are some of these properties where folks live all over the world. We found folks in Peru that didn't really want to be found. We found people in Canada on their vacation, but they actually lived in New Jersey. It was right before a tax sale. We found Switzerland. I mean, we found people all over the world. But, when you see a property that the owner isn't alive anymore, it might be simple. 3 people living down the street. Or there might be 40, 50. We've got done one with 60 people that lived across the United States. So you have to start looking for them. And, this is a contingent deal. I'm the last guy to get paid. So I got to have the resources to be able to find folks, decide if it makes sense. If they're all being reasonable, we can cut a deal. And the genealogy thing became so much more important for those type of projects. But the neat thing is he's an incredible researcher. and is able to do all kinds of other fun stuff that's not necessarily genealogy related too, like the land title abstracting, things like that. It's a great skill set that can cross over a lot of those boundaries.
So you discovered, and so let's, and I think maybe this is more to a little bit of that mindset. You saw opportunity east side of San Antonio because you saw a few other things, and call it the fear, the primal urge to not screw it up. You're finally making some money. You invested in there. Then you bought a something with dirty title. You had to go fix it, and you went to a real estate attorney, and real estate attorneys are, man, real estate and law is a lot of times opinion. Same thing like doctors. I think it's not an exact science. And so I'm sure there's a myriad of people that you've had to work through from the legal side of this and now the genealogy. But if you could kind of go to like mindset, like what have you done to evolve that to where now you're doing, commercial deals, you're buying these ranches, you're buying kind of, bigger priced, bigger ticket items where it's not a $5,000 lot anymore. Like now it's real money. And so you're like, this is real. I should probably put my big boy pants on. What is it? Do you still have that? I'm scared of, losing this. And so now it's that, or what has happened in that journey and what have you needed to do to unlock those next levels?
That's a good point. I started to learn that folks that were really successful just had a unique mindset. They may not be smarter than me or harder working than me or other people, but they thought about things differently. And I realized that, I don't know, within a few years. So I actively tried to think differently. And I talked to folks that I thought were more successful than I was to try to understand what that looked like. And I really started to realize that one of these small deals can be the same amount of time as a big deal. The difference is there are more zeros behind it, and you have to obviously figure out how to finance it in a different way. But it really is the same amount of work, just more zeros. And I think with some accomplishments comes a little bit of confidence. There was zero confidence at the beginning because I hadn't completed anything. It was kind of just a stab in the dark and headed the right direction and hoping that it was going to work. Once things started to work, I started to say, well, I'm having more and more confidence. And when it got to the point where I realized the odds of it not working out were very, very low, or maybe let's say 1 in 100 deals went in the wrong direction. I made a bad call, made a mistake, and it went sour. I can afford to lose 1 out of 100. It doesn't even matter anymore. It's like Walmart has a shrink budget, the same type deal. So, but when you're looking at the commercial deals, one thing that really helped me understand this is you're not really buying real estate the same way a single family house is or a lot is. You're buying a business that happens to come attached to land, and it's called real estate, but you're really buying a business is what it is. It performs, it's got income, it's got expenses, things like that. And when I started to look at it like that with a financing component to it, it just looked like any other business I was buying, and less like a piece of real estate that you had to find the comps for. It's like, dude, this income covers the debt plus 2 times. How am I going to fucking lose this? Or the income barely covers the debt. So if something goes wrong, I'm going to have some trouble. Well, I don't want to do that deal. I don't have enough margin of safety. So when I started to look at it that way, things were different, way different.
So I take this as, I know we have families, we got young kids. And I think maybe that was a collective, connection point as a father now. And did I just see that your kid was roller skating through the house at 2:00 in the morning?
All that.
That's a random dad thing that, you just see and you're like, what is going on? But what are you trying to do as a father? You have, call it, success in this certain area of your life that's leading to it. But then how are you giving that or handing this off or teaching your kids or to hopefully avoid maybe some of the mistakes that we've made? What are some of the lessons that you've taken and what are you working on?
Well, first I have to give a huge amount of credit to my wife, because without her, this household would collapse and we'd all probably be under a bridge. We might have some money in our bank accounts, but we wouldn't figure out how to hold it together. So, that everything kind of starts from that foundation, I think. And there are a lot of lessons that my wife and I both have learned over the years, and we have a lot of similar ideology from what she's brought to the household and what I brought. And everything we do bleeds from that. So as small as getting ready for dinner, if the kid doesn't do something right, we'll explain to them, you should try it this way because it affects you this way. And this is why that's better forever. All those lessons just compounded every single thing we're doing. So a good example of that is my oldest daughter and son argue about the TV. And one of them always says, okay, the younger one, the son says, all right, you can watch the TV this time and I get to watch it next time. But you know what happens next time? They get into a fight and I say, I'm gonna take the remote away. And the younger son says, okay, you can watch it this time and I'll get it next time. So he always gives in and he loses. So I said, all right, guys, I see someone's getting the short end of the stick. Y'all, they know what a contract is. So I said, go get a notebook paper, go get a pen. Put down on that piece of paper what you guys are talking about and both sign it. We're gonna put it on the fridge. And the next time the TV comes into dispute, we're gonna go back to the agreement and that's gonna settle it. So they write contracts about their TV now, and their spelling's horrible and it wouldn't hold up, but the concept is here. So they're starting to understand it doesn't mean anything if it's not written on paper. Folks quickly forget. These little lessons are starting to permeate that little brain.
That's awesome. That's a great advice. I have not gone to that level
I know.
with
Something
my
else I
kid.
will tell you is we were very open about finances. Kids don't know what our bottom line net worth is, but we talk about money on a relative scale. When we spend money to buy something, we say this is X amount of days wages for this type of trade, or this is this amount of years work for this profession. This is what you're exchanging. So you guys really have to understand that. We bring it relative. We talk about money all the time. Money wasn't talked about a huge amount in our household, and that's not bad or not good, but by at least focusing on it, you have an understanding of it and it becomes something they're aware of, and they can use that later if they want to. It's a tool they got.
That's awesome. I do some things like that interesting as a parent. What you're trying to do is, you've seen the movie Inception.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to incept things into their head, into like plant seeds that I'm going to water over years. And I'm playing the long game of this. And so, getting my son to start, investing and looking at the abundance that exists in the world. And so now he's building a business that he sells stuff online, arbitrarily Facebook marketplace, setting up some eBay accounts, some other things like that. And I've been helping him and, brought a mentor in to help him, do those things. Cause I don't sell a lot of stuff online like that. So
you won't listen to daddy like you will somebody else. I appreciate that.
yeah. And so then it's just that there's abundance. And then, taking that as that he's investing that into a vending machine business. And so he's going to take that into a smart vending machine business that he can, scale and create, and investing in the technology and other things. So, putting those seeds that I've been over the years it's one of those challenges. So I wanted to take that, to the component you mentioned about being around other successful people or the way that they think differently. And obviously, and I'm bringing this to, as a parent, I try to put some of those people in my kids' lives. What has or who have been some of those mentors or those successful, or maybe it's a book, or maybe there weren't any and you just discovered it through your own, trial and error. But has there been people that have done that to help elevate and change that mindset? And if so, if there's, who's the secret? How do you unlock that?
Well, I will have to say that I think certain personality traits genetically are just, and it's a hereditary thing that's drawn to certain types of behaviors and certain types of patterns and things like that. Because I see my daughter exhibiting certain patterns. I'm like, wow, that's going to benefit you well. Although it drives me insane as a parent right now because I can't corral that bull. I can see what that's going to do for her because I appreciated my life. So some of that's inherent. It's just in your DNA. And I believe there's some parts of this that I've just have in my blood, for lack of better terms. I'll say from my mom's standpoint, she was very resilient, especially as a female in a male business, particularly when she was in sales and marketing, the radio. So there's a lot of resiliency, a lot of headstrong there, I guess. My dad looked at things from a very analytical way, and I think I picked a good amount of that up from him. Also, a business partner I picked up along the way that I still work with today was not a ton older than me, but he was super bright. He looked at $100 million businesses for a large part of his career and participated with some of them. And his experience was, the lifetime of 10 entrepreneurs or more, because he got to see across all of those. And I think he really, really helped me become a better business person. I felt like I could sell. I felt like I could figure deals out, but he just helped me become a much better business person. That was huge. And then, of course, just being around people listening, you're like, damn, that guy's bright and he's got good ideas. Like, that's happened along the way. But there are, 3 or 4 people, the ones I mentioned specifically, that just, I feel like rubbed off a ton.
Has there been any kind of like books or, maybe it's all in person, as far as those people or anything, because you talk at a higher level, and at least I pick up on that as far as your margin for safety or, those things. It's more financial terms than, and maybe that's just communication with other people, but has there been anything that, led you to real estate or to mindset or, kind of unlocking these next levels?
I'll say, like, a lot of the Grahams and the Buffetts, their books, I've read those, and, they're freaking super high level, super bright guys. And I got to understand a lot of the terminology, I guess, and concepts by reading their stuff. But I read a lot of that stuff early on, so I didn't really know what it meant. And when I got in rooms of guys that were way up there above me, I started to hear them, and I started to be part of the conversation, and the context clues started to make it real. And then the business partner I was telling you about is, at that level. So those are part of daily conversations. And whether I picked up from outside or wherever, it becomes ingrained when you work with someone day to day. So that was super helpful. But some of that early reading helped. I'll tell you, one of my favorite books today still is How to Win Friends and Influence People, the Carnegie book. It doesn't matter, in my opinion, if you're running a landscaping business or a hedge fund, or you're an artist. I don't know, if you can sell and if you can connect with people and you can understand them on a really deep internal level. Matthew McConaughey's new book kind of talks about this a little bit. You can get green lights out of that, or you can plant seeds that evolve into green lights. And it's getting what you want out of life is what it boils down to, but you have to be able to sell that. And maybe in your example, if you're coming to San Antonio with somebody who might want to invest in a fund that you've got, and you're not really trying to get $5 million out of him right now, but what you're trying to do is you're trying to sell him on that you're a trustworthy person, that you're going to take care of his money and be a good steward. You're bringing him to a market that's incredible, and you want to introduce him to some really solid people to help add to your credibility and knowledge base and attachment to the local community. You're selling. You really are, even though you're not trying to close them on a sale like a vacuum cleaner sells you out your front door. Like, so to me, that book, I've read it more times than I can count. I love that book. I'll read it for the rest of my life. I'll give it for gifts every year to people because I'll never forget the first job that I got, the first job offer out of college. I read that book beforehand the very first time. My mom gave it to me, by the way, and I still have that copy. I went to Hewitt, which is a huge industrial construction company, and got interviewed by this guy. And it was my first interview out of college. I didn't know my head from my butt, never been in a real interview. And I remember reading in that book, ask people about themselves, get them talking, look around their office, because Dale Carnegie talked about this in his book. Look around their office, look at pictures of memorials, things they have in there. And I started asking this guy about his fishing stuff, his golfing stuff. And that dude liked me. We didn't even talk about work, and they made a job offer to me. And I could have been a shitty worker and stupid, but he liked me. and he could feel that there was that connection. That's how I got my first job interview or offer, was from that book. I copied it. So I love that book.
Yeah, that is a one of those classics, and obviously why it's transcended time as far as because of those. Obviously, I think you had to take the action steps. I mean, you could read that and conceptualize that in your head, but if you had not noticed those things on the wall, the fishing pictures, those other things, and brought that up in a conversation piece, it would have been, how do you know that they actually liked you or connected? And also to understand how to relate to some of those. I mean, if you're ingenuine and you're, fishing and you don't actually fish at all, I think that maybe people can see through that a lot easier. But
I'll give you an example. In that case, it's really thinking things through, from a dirty title to the fishing thing or whatever. At that point, I hadn't done a lot of fishing in my life, but this dude was holding a picture of him, or holding a massive fish, dude. It was huge. And it looked like he was on some exotic beach. And I saw that and I was like, that's cool. I've never done that or seen that or been there ever. So I asked him, I'm like, dude, where are you? It looks like you're in some crazy place. And he starts telling me about it. I'm like, well, you didn't find that fish in the toilet. Like, dude, that's bananas. How'd you figure this shit out? Because I was truly like astonished by it. He got to explain to me how he became a good fisherman and the awesome place he caught it at. And I don't know shit about fishing at the time, but I told him that. And that's why he felt comfortable about it to me, because it was honest, transparent, and genuine curiosity. So
yeah, just being yourself and telling people, that how has that translated in Dale Carnegie's to buying some of these properties? I mean, because they're not like, it's not like, advertised in MLS. They're oftentimes, not, even in the newspaper, maybe a few obscure trustee sale kind of things like that. But how has that taken it from discovering your first job to now transacting and buying some of these properties?
So I feel like relationships sometimes we work with oil and gas abstract title companies. We work with a lot of different attorneys, surveyors, environmental report companies, just all these different third-party folks. And the more that I'm able to get them to trust us and want to work with us and have those relationships, the more referrals we get, the more they treat us well when we come to them with a project. And then, of course, when you're dealing with the specific folks who are in a tough spot, I don't know, a commercial building's getting foreclosed on. This dude's been successful his whole life. His wife left and became a drunk, and his triple net tenant ain't paying the taxes, and he ain't got the money, and he's too afraid to hire an attorney and go after this ding dong tenant. I know that he's hurting. And a lot of folks who don't have any heart just call him and go straight to the point. And I call, find out who this dude is as a human, talk to him about these problems. And I'm very transparent. I say, look, man, I think I can solve these problems, but you got to know, if you went and sold this and fixed them on your own, you're going to get top dollar maximum. I'm kind of like a pawn shop, but I'm going to take care of you through the process, and I'm going to solve this. And I'm not going to just cut bait when you sign. I really will work through this the right way. They can understand that, and they believe it. And they would rather work with me than the 17th dude that cold call them off of a tax delinquent list. I also believe that's translated into building a very good culture in our office. There are 13 people in our office right now. We've recently started to hire more because we were ready. And I feel like the culture translates. We found folks that believe in the way we think. So I think it's huge, from just the deal to the organization to the third-party trade partners, even bankers. When you sit down, I know they have all these check boxes and metrics and whatever they've got to fill out to approve a loan, but I've had several bankers say, I believe you and your business partner, no matter what all this shit says on paper, if this deal goes bad, you're going to pay us back. I see that in you and I believe it, or you're a great con man. One of the two. I don't think you're the con man. And I feel like that makes a huge difference when the bankers are underwriting their deals.
How much? I know a lot of your early deals, you didn't use debt. And we've had this conversation because I know debt is a nice lever of a tool to pull on to make some better returns. But I mean, you have to be judicious with the use of leverage. What does that look like today for you? I mean, because are you still using debt? You know, the market and debt's crazy cheap right now. Interest rates are bananas. You know, are you using debt? And if so, is there kind of a percentage that you're trying to stay at or around? And what gives you comfort or doesn't give you comfort today?
Early on, I would use some hard money or private money because that's just the only way that I could do it. And when I got over that hump, it was a very heavy reinvestment, and I'd really peeled a small amount away from me for the business to live on. So there's a lot of reinvestment. So then I went through a phase where there was zero debt, absolutely none. It was only cash. And then I started getting to the point where I said, the bank trusts me. I got some, a little bit of going concern, I guess, here. And at that point, I started getting some credit lines with the local banks. And as long as there's a short enough turn, I'd feel good about using a credit line because most of these assets are relatively liquid once I'm done with them. It's more like a widget than it would be like a piece of real estate. Banks see real estate as illiquid, but I bring a pretty heavy component of liquidity to it because I get a good deal and I give a good deal. So when I sell it, I'm selling for a relatively fair price, so it sells quick. And the banks could start to see that. So I started to do get some credit lines, and that was working. I felt more comfortable with it. Interest rates, like you just said, plummeted. And as the business started to get more stable on all fronts, we've got a mortgage note portfolio, got the private equity investments, and then the troubled title stuff, and then we got the mortgage or the commercial assets. Things started to stabilize. So started to feel a little more comfortable with the debt. So started to use a little bit more of the permanent debt on some of the bigger stuff like the apartment buildings or the commercial warehouses or office stuff. I just use, fixed term perm debt. And these days the banks are anywhere in the 2s to 4s on those rates. So, they're wanting you to put down a quarter or so of it. But if I'm buying it for less than it's worth already, and then I'm putting down a quarter to a third or 40% because A, the bank loves it when I do that, so I have no problems with underwriting. B, it makes me feel better because my monthly obligation is lower. So I'm really kind of I'm bringing that margin of safety up for myself when I buy right. I'm using more cash than the average person. So just all elements of risk start to go down along the way. And when that happens, plus the interest rates are as low as they are, I say, okay. So at this point, a fair amount of I would say 80% of the commercial deals that I'll do have a debt component to them now. And like you said, that allows you to lever upwards. And as long as it comes with good cash flow or has cash flow near, or it's a short hold on the asset, dude, all problems solve themselves there.
So I'm curious as far as, your portfolio. I know you have a little bit of multifamily, some commercial, some other things like that. Have you invested into tax sales? Sounds like you're maybe carrying some notes back. What is your kind of the mix of your portfolio and kind of percentages? Again, disclaimer, just because, this is what Logan does, or when I discuss about some of these things, this is not investment advice. Seek investment attorneys. Don't make just the assumption that since Logan's smart that I should do that as well.
Well, I'll say a lot of folks say that you should diversify, and sometimes the hedge against risk is being highly specialized. So, pretty much all my chips, well, with the exception of some that are in private equity deals, 80, 90% of my chips are in the real estate business. The neat thing is I feel like my risk is low because my basis is low and the debt's low. So the market could shutter by 50% and everything would still remain stable. I probably wouldn't be making very much at that point, but I'm not at a risk of loss of any assets at that point. So I'm really well covered up there. I would have to look and tell you specifically on the balance, but running rough numbers in my head, I bet about 20%. I bet about 20% is the mortgage note portfolio. I bet about 50% is the commercial assets because those are bigger, and one asset can take up a bigger part of the total portfolio. Just, you pick up a 25,000 square foot warehouse or, 50 or 100 unit apartment complex, that's a bigger lick at once. I bet the commercial assets take about 50%, and then the remaining 30% are what I would call like current inventory, just stuff that we bought and we're doing title work or cleaning up a site or something like that to resell it. So maybe a third is what I'd call current assets, inventory maybe.
With inflation, do you plan on changing any of that? Are you holding more cash? Are you doing anything to change your investment strategy? 2021, we're rolling into almost 2022, or maybe it's 2022 when this episode actually airs. We've seen inflation at a 30-year high.
Yeah.
And maybe even, real world inflation is much more significant than what they, put out there in the media. Are you doing anything? What are you seeing? And, put your prediction hat on, your crystal ball. What do you see happening over the next few years versus when you were investing in 2012, 13, and 14 was kind of the bottom of the market? You've been through an era of never having a down market. So what does the next 3 years look like for your predictions? And then are you doing anything differently from your portfolio preparing for that?
Well, you're right. I started at the bottom of the market and just basically have been riding this wave. So the wave that I've been riding as it grows, just like you have this to go around, makes me and anybody else look 50% smarter than we really are. Because when every asset you have continues to appreciate at double-digit numbers every single year or more, well, even an idiot can look smart here. So I have to give half the credit to that. But I think if 100 people give you a prediction of what's going to happen, maybe 3 or 4 out of 100 are right, and those 3 or 4 out of 100 are lucky. So what I can tell you is you and I both know that statistically speaking and historically speaking, we're overdue for a correction. But we're starting to get all this, the easing that the federal government and the central banks are doing. You've got artificially low interest rates that the government is affecting there. I mean, those are all things that those are just cheats on the normal economic cycle. So, it's really, really hard, I feel like, to predict that. So what I keep telling myself is, how do I be safe in good times and bad times? And you got to remember, folks talk about that margin of profit. They're always shooting for the profit margin. For me, I take that profit margin and I rotate it downwards. That's my margin of safety. So I have that much room to lose equity, lose cash flow, have a market fallout on me before I start losing principal. So that's my safety net is what it is. But if you have a big enough safety net that you never have to exercise, then that's your profit. So I've engineered in my mind, based on it because of the fear, the margin of safety in every single asset that I've got. So if the market were to take a hefty hit, I mean, literally sales could stop and rents could go away by 50% and mortgage payments could go away by 50% from my borrowers, I'm still going to have enough to keep the lights on, cover my debt, and be okay. So I haven't really done anything to hedge against inflation because if I'm able to buy something for 5, 10, 15, 20, 50% less than it's worth, I'm not tripping about 5% or 10% because I picked up 50%. It really goes back to the value investing. And if you get a great deal at the beginning, I'm not smart enough to figure all that crap out. But if I can get a smoking good deal at the beginning, my dumb ass ain't gonna lose no money. That's the best way I can say it. And it sounds like a lot of those old crazy farmers you meet, that are worth like crazy money, is driving a beat up truck and wearing overalls. And you're like, I don't get it. He's not that sophisticated. But I think if very core basic principles are used, you don't have to be.
Well, it's the old adage of real estate. I think a lot of people are disillusioned to the get rich quick scheme of it. And if you just use those principles of it's pretty tried and true you can get rich with real estate over time.
but
And
not overnight.
right. And it's over time. And exactly that is this is a, let the market go up and down and do those other things and position yourself. So I wanted to address one other thing, as a fanboy of Logan and what you've been doing, your Gibbs mansion. And kind of now you've evolved that in growing, your own personal residence that you're doing this super rad, very period mid-century modern, but like a vibe on that. And now you bought an office building and now you're redeveloping some of those. So I'd like you to dive into some of these. These guys are a little bit more of a passion project for you. Or at least that's the way I see them. And dive into some of the history of that. You bought a foreclosed kind of falling down, tell me the whole story of the Gibbs mansion in Government Hill there.
So it's interesting. It is a passion project. It became one, but the neat part is the numbers really made sense. So I'm that much more passionate about it. But I was renting an office back in 2018. And it was tough for me because I'm in the real estate business. And I hate paying rent to somebody. But I came across a foreclosure. Back then, we were still doing a fair amount of foreclosures. And I came across this deal that was, a lot more money than the average house in that particular neighborhood that was right by downtown, right by one of the big developments, the Pearl, just that whole little area. It was like twice or three times the price of the normal house over there. I thought, what the heck? I'm just looking at a spreadsheet. So I Google it and I see this massive mansion. It's like, I don't know, Gothic Victorian revival with a huge porch that wraps around the side, almost 6,000 square foot. Like, it was impressive, but it definitely looked beat up. And I just thought, my gosh, this is incredible. So I cold called the dude like anybody else and just say, hey, you want to sell this thing? It looks like it's not being used. And he said, yeah. So I couldn't quite cut a deal with him. He was just being a little hard-headed. So it goes to foreclosure, and I called the bank the next day and said, I'd like to buy it. Here's what I can pay. And what I could pay was basically what the payoff was or what the bank had in it. So we executed the contract, and I closed about a month later. And incredibly enough, the inside was awesome. I mean, it was dated, but it was just structurally and just finish out was awesome. Now the outside was horrible. I spent 50% of what I paid for the building on the exterior. New wood, new paint, new porch boards, just new structural on the porches. Those big old porches needed help. I had to put a new roof on it. And that was a metal roof with TPO combo. So it was a lot, but over the course of about 6 to 8 months, I was working out of one of the offices in there and fixing it. It's just been an incredible place. I've got a tenant upstairs who rents 50% of the building from me. So I got about 3,000 square foot and they got somewhere around there. It's been awesome. It's got such a story. It's so fun to be in, and the location's great. Now, the tricky part is I told you we've been hiring. And I'm looking around like this tenant's got, 6 years as their lease. They're in it a year and a half. They're not going anywhere. I'm out of space on the bottom floor. So I tried to buy 2 duplexes across the street from the owner and convert those into office, much like ours, just a little complex. That he was unreasonable and fine. I said, you know what? I'm gonna go look for another office. Just got a hair up my butt that day. I stumbled across one. And I did some research, and the sellers had some bankruptcy issues on another separate business they had. This building had been on the market a long time, and it needed a real heavy makeover in terms of mechanicals. That's a big price on that kind of building, as you know. So I made them a really low offer, but I needed it that low because I had to do mechanicals, the whole deal. I was gonna have to gut about 10,000 square foot of the 15,000 square foot building. So I hit them low, but I justified it and said, I'm trying to get to market. This is market. This is the repairs. This is all I can give you. And I'm not trying to get profit on top of that. I'm just trying to be in this thing for market once it's fixed. And they took the deal. So I'm actually getting ready to sell the mansion.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I went back and forth between, do I keep it and lease out the bottom? Do I sell it and roll that into this next deal? And I have to stay true to the don't fall in love with the stock mantra. So it makes a lot of sense for me to roll that forward into this next deal. So after about 4 months, I'm not going to be the owner of that thing anymore.
Well, I'll make sure in the show notes that they put links to. I know that the newspaper and a couple of places have put some articles about that, and then share some pictures of it. It's beautiful. I mean, it is. It was late 1800s, 1884, 1885, something like that, and absolutely. Neoclassical, like, man, what a cool. And also there's a Gibbs building downtown that was an office building, the same kind of the same gentleman business. I don't know what he did, and maybe there's some of the articles go into some of those details. I'm sure you've dove into that. But your personal house, you're doing this mid-century modern, like you got like terrazzo floors, you're doing, kind of, was it oh man, that's beautiful.
You can kind of see parts of it, the stone and the wood and all that. Yeah.
How'd you come to that? Why mid-century modern? Or, how did that kind of play out, that project?
I've never liked being inside. When I was a kid, I'd literally go ride my bike for 6 hours on Saturday, and I didn't want to go inside. I hated it. And I started to realize that buildings that had lots of glass made me feel more comfortable because I kind of felt like I was outside. And there's a letter I wrote to myself, like at the end of 5th grade or whatever, and they put it in this thing, give it to you to graduate high school. And I remember saying I wanted to be an architect as my profession and build houses with glass walls. And so that's something that's been inside me, but I never had. It hasn't materialized anywhere. And when we bought this house, me and my wife, back in 2017, it's got the glass, the windows that are just, 16, 18, 20 foot wide, huge banks of glass all over the place. And we love that. And it's got the modern look, which I like because it's clean and simple. And I feel comfortable in that kind of environment, I guess. So we bought it and moved in. We got a great deal on it at the time. And we lived here up until last summer, which we moved out last summer and just gutted it. But the challenge was to rebuild it in a way that was appropriate, but still felt like it was new materials, but we didn't lose the character. So yeah, it was a year-long. We were talking about that earlier. I managed the project like an idiot. I shouldn't have, but.
So, and I think we said that. It's probably taken 2 or 3 times as long and cost about 2 or 3 times than if you just hired somebody else to do it.
You're probably right on that. Yeah.
But
we got a neat place to live.
You wanted to be an architect and build houses with glass walls.
Yeah.
Do you still have that paper or
no?
note?
I have it in my office. So there's that letter, and there was one other one that I wrote to myself about being a gold trader, and some guy came and gave me a chest full of gold, and I sold it all, never had to work again a day in my life. And those 2 letters, it's strange because that seed is in you apparently when you're really young, and you get to see where it winds up when you're old. The only people that get to watch that are your parents, really, because you are not aware of that. But reading those 2 letters were interesting because it helped me understand that.
Has anybody given you a chest of gold yet?
No, but I've got some nuggets along the way. Does that count?
So what you're saying is you need to start buying some like gold mines or some something else. Get those mineral rights cooking. Maybe expand your pure view of what you're investing into. So what's an ideal? Somebody, said, wow, I really like, here in Logan, I got a problem like this. I got a property that, I can't get rid of, or it's got a problem. What is an ideal thing for you, and then how do they, reach out to connect with you? Or if you're looking for deals, I assume that you are still a gunslinger and hustling and looking for things that you can do. So what is that perfect deal? And then how can people connect, with you on that?
Well, first I'll say that we do a lot of deals with folks. Sometimes it makes sense for us to take the asset and give them money in exchange. Sometimes they'll become a partner with us and we say, we'll figure out how to solve this, and then we'll split the equity up on the back end, because if we charge you the fees that it takes to make it work, then it doesn't work for y'all. So we partner with folks. And we've cut the deal so many different ways. It's incredible. But I just encourage folks to call and talk to me or somebody in my office about the deal. There are so many solves that we've learned over the last 10 years that I can literally tell someone on the phone, dude, the title company has your Schedule C showing this judgment or lien is attached to that property, but that's this person's homestead in Texas. That judgment or lien can't legally stick to that. It's protected under homestead laws. So send a certain letter to that debtor and ask for, or that creditor and ask for partial release, dude. It takes you an hour and 2 hours of attorney's time. This fixes your problem. I mean, I give people that information all the time. I tell them I'm not a lawyer, not giving you any advice, but if this is what I would do. If you call an attorney and ask him, the right attorney, he'll tell you this. So we give folks free advice all the time to just fix their problem. But if it's more complicated than that, I'll tell them, all right, dude, this is probably not something you need to do on your own. Let's talk about how this looks. So I encourage folks to call us. There's always somebody in our office that will talk. You can Google search my name, Logan Fullmer. You can Google search Asset Resolution Partners. Our office line is there. You can find some information on Facebook sometimes. We put out there. But yeah, I think that's the best way.
So what if,
let me go back. I didn't answer your question. What does the right deal look like?
Yeah.
If it can't close through title insurance, or you don't know how to fix it and you're not getting the right answers and you're stuck, that's when you should call.
Yeah, that makes sense as far as your if it can be solved, the title company part of thing is probably not the right priced structure. And again, your adage as far as solving a big enough problem, and getting paid and rewarded for that. What if, somebody wants to partner with you, wants to invest with you? They're like, hey, Logan's super sharp. I love what he's doing. I want to go give him barrels of money. Are you taking on investors? Are you doing funds? What are you doing that it's, from that, or is it all self-funded? And, are you looking for investors?
Right now, no. I've had folks all the time. We go to get our teeth cleaned at the dentist office, and they know who we are, and they always ask, can we invest with you? And, at this point, I haven't done that. We've been able to, self-grow, and I like that because the responsibility is simply to me and any partners that I have in the deal. And, that's it. I feel like the level of accountability is as high as it could ever be if it's pretty much all yours or your own personal guarantee or whatever. And I know a lot of folks, their goal first is to get as much non-recourse debt, as much borrowed money as they can. But I feel like my personal accountability has kept me accountable to a good deal. Sometimes I think when people use others' money, they manage or they borrow too much, they get sloppy. And that's just been something that, our office has really been cautious about. Some of the deals we looked at a big timber deal last year that was 4,500 acres of timber out in Louisiana. And I knew that if that deal made sense, I could handle it in terms of operationally, but I could not handle it financially. So that was a time where I was looking at taking on some kind of financial partner there. So in the future, if those were to happen, they would be on a case-by-case basis, but they would be much bigger deals. But the standard stuff in our wheelhouse, I've been able to kind of internally manage so far.
Well, that's, I think, exactly in what you just said, the ability to be patient. And so, that's one of the things that I tell people all the time, as far as everybody's so in a hurry to go do stuff, to get into the deal and to do them. And I've had funds where you had mandates, like you had to deploy capital in certain time periods or else. And like you said, it causes this, like, we got to go, and you would buy sometimes deals that didn't make sense or were fringed, and a lot of things had to play out appropriate or hit the top end of the spectrum to be a good deal. When you do that internally, you can be patient. If the deal doesn't hit these benchmarks or these parameters, we're not going to do the deal. So yeah, I really appreciate that, the thoughtfulness in which you approach.
What you said makes sense though, is as I guess 10 years ago, I could say you and I were young investors. Now I'd say we're middle-aged investors, but still relatively young compared to like some of the old timers that have been doing this for 40 years, we still have this urge to grow and grow as quickly as we can. And that is a constant fight to say, do I just go explosive and borrow every nickel? And, that could work because there are tons of people that it does, but I know tons of developers that have filed bankruptcy 3 times and they're successful today, but they've been bankrupt 3 times. They've gone through 2 divorces. That level of strain is different. So you have to balance. It's a balancing act. And some people can manage it. It doesn't bother them. And some people are successful with that. But I know that when I go to bed every night, no one's coming to knock for a mortgage payment. I'm not overextended anywhere. And I don't have to have investor emails popping in when something goes crazy out there. And now I'm terrified sitting behind my computer figuring out how to answer 45 investors. That's not part of my life. And I don't want it to be. So
fair. And like you said, I know lots of people that do it both ways.
Folks are great at it. I'm like, fuck that. No, not for me. That's all.
Well, I wanted to, honor your time. I'm really thankful for getting a chance to discuss these things. Digging in, researching. I think it's usually pretty creepy to do that on your friends if you're not preparing for a podcast sometimes. Yeah. But, I think the nature of our business is that we do that. Like we dig in and like, what do these people own? Like, what is this? Because you're looking to make offers sometimes to people and you're like, well, let's see their finance. Oh, they owe $1 million on that property.
Yeah.
Me offering them $250,000, they're probably not going to accept that.
Right.
But this gives me the opportunity to spend some time to dive in, to hear a little bit more of your backstory. And I just really appreciate that. Where places that people can find you besides other than just having if they don't have an asset that needs some resolution, is there places, are you active on social media, or, Reddit or Discord or, Instagram? And then are you sharing some of this stuff for this wisdom that you have accumulated over the years in other places?
I do that on Facebook. I'm not super active on a lot of the other social media platforms just because I learned how to use Facebook and I kept using it. And that's really all I do. We do a fair amount of networking. There's a lot of stuff around town, but I'll do classes every once in a while on a specific topic, and we'll get anywhere from 20 to 100 people together and do those that are curative title work, land development, contracts the way I understand them, things like that. Another thing is, man, we're really open in our office. There are several guys, including me, that if somebody wants to come in and talk with us and meet for an hour, I understand we're not billing them for the time it takes me away from a project. But I believe that our networks are worth at least half of what our net worth really is because they're so important. So I tell people, call us, come by our office, come have some coffee, man. If I'm busy, someone else is open. If someone else is busy, I'm open. Like, come meet us. And we spend a ton of our time doing that. So they should call our office. Come on.
Awesome. Well, Logan, I appreciate your time. Where can they find you? Just your Facebook, just the Logan Fullmer.
Yeah.
Just Googling that and they'll pull up his.
Yep. Office phone number is on Google too. If you Google the name, you'll see the office and the phone number's there, and Facebook. Yeah.
Again, also in the show notes, we'll put some links to that. I know I've seen some of those classes that you've hosted in the past. If you have any active links of those, we'll put those down there so people can find those. I think, that the niche of the understanding the contract, how to get out, how to do some of these corrective title issues is like super next level real estate investing. What I've found that is so fascinating about Logan is the way that he sees the world and solving these people's problems. It is actually unlocking value through solving problems. The Gibbs mansion, as far as something that's falling down, a beautiful old, building going through foreclosure and then reviving it in the passion. And I get to see that as a friend. And this is a small little lens of a view into his life. I hope that's helpful to some of the audience members here. You can connect to Logan and the many other locations, follow him and his journey in real estate investing. And thank you.
No doubt. Thanks, Jake. It's always a pleasure.